Okay, so in this section, I want to cover a few different ways we can have some active defense techniques. So as we're thinking about how could I deal with the onslaught coming from attackers, definitely becomes useful to know what are some ways I can actively see who's connected to my computer, what is it that they might be doing, and maybe go and take some actions about that. All right, so for this particular environment, the way that I want to do this is I want to leverage the fact that my Kali machine already has a server. So in this example, I'll have my Kali machine be the server. So if I double check my IP, I'm currently at 192.168.195.100. All right, that's my IP. And if I do something like a systemctl status SSH, I'll be able to see, oh yeah, this does have an SSH server that's currently running. And hopefully if it's already configured, and if I don't have to configure anything else on this, then what I'll do is I'll have my Ubuntu machine connect to this particular device. All right, that's just the way that I'm going to go about doing this. Now, in order to do this, I want to see what it simulates, what it's like to simulate if there were multiple users logged into the system. And right now, I only have the sandbox user on this particular device. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to make a few extra users here real quick. I'll do something like a sudo add user Bob, and I'll go ahead and confirm my password. Whoop, let's type it correctly. And then I'll create just a silly little password for Bob, like hello, something I can remember for the next few minutes here as I have to log in as Bob. Not going to fill out any of these details, like, okay, fine, yes, that's good. And I'll also make another user like Jenny, sudo add user Jenny, right? The usernames don't matter. I'm just making a few users on my system to simulate what would it be like if I were to have a few different active users that are remotely connected to my computer. I want to see what those connections look like. Okay. And then of course the idea here is on my Ubuntu device, I want to see, I want this to kind of be the client that's going to go and connect to them. So I'll try logging in as Bob, right? I'll do like an SSH Bob at 192.168.195.100. And let's see if I can connect as Bob. Hello is my password. Okay, fine. So now I'm logged into the Kali machine remotely as Bob. And what does it look like if I do kind of the same thing, but I also do it as Jenny, right? I'll have another terminal open that I open up as Jenny, SSH Jenny at 192.168.195.100, something like that. Type in Jenny's password, and yes, Jenny is now able to access the system as well. So we can think about this as we've got some remote connections to my Kali computer, and my Kali computer happens to be kind of behaving as the server right now. So the thing that I want to see is like, okay, if you're on the server, what does it look like if you've got someone who's remotely connected to your computer? And we've got a few different ways that I'd like to approach this. The first way that I want to take a look at this is by exploring the netstat command. So netstat, let's take a look at that one, netstat. This is a useful command to take a look at. And when you look at netstat, you'll see like the output on this particular command is really quite daunting. Right? Because when you take a look through it, you're like, oh boy, I've got lots of information, lots of output, like way too much to look at here at any one time. And so that does become a part of the issue here when dealing with netstat is it is very, very useful for showing things like open and active connections. And if you take a look at the very, very top of this, it will tell you here are some things that are actively connected, but you have to kind of like start scrolling up and down through a lot of this. And so just learning how to either filter through netstat or thinking about netstat like piping it to other commands like grep or something where you could actually go filtering through the results, like, yeah, that's a really common thing. Or even something like this where you take your netstat results and pipe it to less. And less allows you to now start at the very top of your output, which is oftentimes the part that you're looking for, the thing that shows your active connections. And then you could scroll down through some of this all the way to the bottom. And of course, when you're all done with less, you can just hit Q to go back to your command line. But just whatever technique you actually want to use to take a look at this. What I'd like to recommend here today is that, yes, we're going to use the netstat command, but let's also start to learn some of the filtering options that go along with it. So I could try this. I'll do something like netstat space -tu. And the nice thing about the -tu is that it filters down to show only things that are related to TCP and UDP. Right. And so a lot of these internal things that we're running that weren't an active open connection right now, like we don't show those. And so by running the netstat tu command, you see, hey, look at that. I actually got this all filtered down to have just the information that I was looking for of having those remote connections. And so it actually shows me here, my local address for my server, the Kali machine in this case, is 192.168.195.100:SSH, right? It's emphasizing this is on an SSH connection. And we can actually see the remote connection as well and the port that it's associated with. All right, so you've got something 192.168.195.2, and on the remote side, it's going to port 51,736. That would be one of the remote connections. The other one is going to port 51,732. So they're both SSH connections coming from the same device, but they use different ports to be able to keep track of which data is meant for which user. That way you could have two different user accounts that are both on SSH, but their data doesn't get crossed. It's because it gets sent to different ports. All right, so yeah, sure, this is a nice thing to be able to see. Another good thing to be able to see is to start to resolve some additional information. So if you want, we're going to kind of keep building on this netstat command. I'm going to say netstat-tun. N is another nice little option. And you'll see what N does is N actually resolves the names of those services. So before it said, well, this is connecting on SSH, and if you don't have all your ports memorized, then it'd be like, well, can you actually tell me exactly which port that is? And of course, that might help you as well, especially if you're combining this with things like firewall information, right? Because on the firewall, you might want to know exactly which port are these connections being made on locally on your server, and perhaps you might want to go doing something about that. So it is kind of a nice little one to know. You know, obviously when you're dealing with SSH or HTTP or HTTPS or, you know, something like that, it becomes very obvious. Like there's a lot of really common ones. But what happens if you're dealing with a service that is a little bit less common or something that you're just not unsure of, you've never seen it before, right? Toss in the N and then that'll actually go and resolve your port number. Another good one that we could have, let's actually keep it going. We could actually toss in an A command. Hey, -tuna. That actually makes it a little easy to remember, -tuna. And let's see what happens when we do that. And you'll see what happens when we take a look at this. We're seeing, well, now we're not just going to see the active connections that we have, right? Those are the ones that are established active connections. Notice it's also telling you what's currently listening. And so this also gives us an indication that, yes, I've got an active SSH connection on this port, and I've got an active SSH connection on this port, but I also have a server that's listening as well. And so this starts to give you the idea that, okay, these active connections were probably created from some other server that's also out there listening and waiting for additional connections. So it helps to establish not just the active ones, but also maybe there's an active server that's willing to create those kind of on the spot. And of course, we're also starting to see how it mixes in here, the difference between IP version 4 and IP version 6, because we do have our SSH server is also listening for SSH connections on IP version 6. And again, maybe you want that, maybe you don't, but at least now you can start to see some of that information. The final command that I'll add on here to our netstat to explore this, and we'll see how this one quite works, or maybe we'll have to tack on to the end, and that's a netstat-tunap, right? We'll add on the P. And what the P says is we're going to start getting process ID information for each one of these open and active connections. Now, it does give us a little warning here and says, if you want to see which process ID is actually associated with each one of these connections, you do have to be root in order to actually run that. So yes, to toss on the -p option, you're going to have to run this with sudo. But that's okay. We've got sudo. We're the admins on this server, so I could say sudo netstat-tunap. And the nice thing now is that you can see, okay, now I actually get the process ID, that's the PID, and I start to get a little bit more information about the name of what is this connection, what's actually running here. So now I can see there's a specific process ID that manages the connection for Jenny. There's a specific process ID that manages the connection for Bob, and there's a specific process ID that manages the SSH server itself. All right, so being able to get these process IDs and knowing what are the users, where are they coming from, what are their IPs, what are the ports, this is all really good information to being able to monitor your open and active connections to your computer. So the next step, especially from a competition perspective, might be, well, you know, okay, maybe Bob is someone who's on my team and I might like that connection, but that Jenny user, Jenny's pretty shady. You know, like maybe that particular connection right there is not something that really should be allowed. I don't know who that is. It's coming from an IP address that perhaps I don't trust, and I might want to do something about it and kill it. And that's the really nice part about doing something like -tunap is you get kind of all of that information of the IP addresses, you get some of that users, you get the process ID, and it really helps you to make the decision of like, do I need to go and kill this right now, or is this something that is someone on my team and I can actually let it persist? But if we made that decision, like, nope, Jenny needs to get the axe, we need to get her out of my system, then a nice command to learn about here off of this is the kill command. And so kill is a command that comes with a whole bunch of options in Linux. And the idea is that you can send kill signals to your different process IDs. This is kind of like the equivalent of Windows when you go to your task manager and say, I'm going to kill this process or end this process or do something like that. Kill is kind of a way that you can do that in Linux. And of course, in order to kill any of your process IDs, this will require sudo. And so this is kind of how it works. I could do something like a sudo kill space and then list the process ID of the thing that I want to kill. All right, and so the process ID in this particular case for the Jenny user for my computer right now is 265465, something like that. So that's what I'll try. I'll try 265465. Yep, that's the process ID right here. Let's go ahead and try that. And okay, it didn't give me any errors. Did it work? If I run my netstat command again, it's like, well, that particular process seems to be gone, right? I just have Bob over here. And if I switch over to my Ubuntu computer where this active connection was coming from, we'll see on the Jenny side, it's like, oh, Jenny, remote connection was closed by host. So this is what it looked like when I had logged in as Jenny over here and had the connection terminated actively. It's, well, yeah, their connection gets closed. Whereas Bob, this is still an active connection that perhaps is allowed. I don't know. Maybe I'll go through and I'll kill both of them, right? I could see, okay, what's the next one? Sure, we get the process of, get the idea of killing things, sudo kill, and then I'll say the next one, 265408, and say, okay, fine, I'll kill that one too. And now if I switch over to Ubuntu, it's like, yeah, okay, that one's been killed as well. So in a competition, this is something you probably want to be monitoring. You want to have, maybe you have somebody who's actively responsible for a short period of time to say, look, we need you to actively monitor our open connections right now. And so maybe that's something that you might spend a little bit of time doing, is actually running these commands periodically and seeing the output of some of this stuff. And then hopefully someone else on your team is spending time securing the server a little bit more. Maybe they're locking down some of the user accounts, changing some of the passwords, you know, enabling firewalls or removing services and closing up ports that really shouldn't be open. Things like that, right? Work as a team when dealing with this. But having someone sitting there, I definitely have seen teams where they've got someone sitting there like this. They just run the netstat command and they're very actively looking at it. And as soon as something foreign pops up, they say, look, okay, we're playing whack-a-mole. I'm going to kill it right now. Now, this is not a good long-term strategy. You cannot sit there for 6 hours and doing that. Okay, maybe I shouldn't challenge you guys. Who knows? I'm not challenging you to try to do that, because someone will just ramp themselves up on Red Bull and Mountain Dew, and then maybe they will try it for 6 hours to do it. But you know, it's a good thing to do periodically, especially if you think you're under a live attack right now. But you definitely should be taking active steps to try to secure your devices as well. So, but anyways, there's a good little set of commands to be able to do something like that. Another common thing that you might want to do, as I mentioned before, if you had something like the netstat command, it is useful if you want to start searching through this. Remember, you could always take your output and pipe it to grep, right? And I could like grep for estab or establish, something like that. Oop, let's go ahead and type it all out. Established. Oh, I don't have any active connections right now. That's why. But anyway, something like that would be also a useful idea whenever you get commands that just have tons and tons and tons of output. That would be something good to know. Let's go ahead and actually reconnect to these devices. I'm going to log back in as Jenny. So then I have these active connections again, and then we'll log back in as Bob. Hello. All right, sure. Now I'm logged back in as Bob. And so now if I try running this again, oops, let's hit my up arrow here and say, oh yeah, now I've got these active connections that are coming from another device. So nevertheless, that's a good little way to kind of approach this. Now, some computers don't come with the netstat command, and so your options are, well, you've got internet access, you could download it and install the tool. If you download it and install the tool, then you'll have the netstat command with you. Another one that does something similar is the ss command, ss. And this one will give you very similar information, where again, you're going to want to be looking for things like established connections. You might be looking for very specific IP addresses. And this one kind of gives you the output here at the bottom. Maybe you would look for TCP connections or whatever. But this is giving you a very, very similar output, and many computers come with the ss command. Again, this is the type of thing, if you try looking through every single one of these things, you're going to be scrolling here for a while to actually find what it is that you're looking for. But in this particular case, this is something that you're probably going to have your output right here at the bottom. And now you can start working through and identifying, okay, who is this? Who's logged in here? Let me find process IDs and perhaps try killing the process ID. So yeah, good thing to learn about. Another good one to learn about here is to see who is logged into the system, not by searching for the remote connection, but by searching by username. And so another good command to learn about is the W command. That's it, just W, all right? It's the who command. And so if you type W on your computer, it will show you who is currently logged in and from where, which is kind of nice. It shows you, it's like, hey, I've got an active connection from this other IP address. And it tells you a little bit of information about where this particular user is coming from. Now, if you ever see something like this, notice the sandbox user has just this :0, something like that. It's because that's an active connection because I'm logged into the GUI right now, right? I'm logged in right here directly on the computer. So that's different than having a remote connection on the computer. Now, from a competition perspective, obviously, equally, each one of these could be just as big a threat, right? Whoever's at the computer typing things, you know, it's especially if they're on a sudo-enabled account, like, yeah, that's a serious concern. But if someone's remotely doing it as well, like, that's also a serious concern. You got to pay attention to that. But at least from the competition perspective, you got to remember the active attackers are not sitting down at your keyboard and doing the typing. They would be the ones that would show up here coming from hacking in from some remote address. All right. So it does give you at least some way to say, all right, I shouldn't be killing the active GUI session because this is somewhat of a shared machine. And what if it's one of my teammates? Right. So you just want to be a little bit careful whenever you're looking at this information. Am I looking at someone who's local or am I looking at someone who's remote? All right. And being able to try to tell the difference. But the next important idea here is, well, what if I wanted to perhaps kill someone? I want to kill someone, but I want to kill them by user ID. All right. And so instead of saying I'm going to go find the specific process ID, maybe I've got this Jenny user or this Bob user, and these users are a bit sus. I shouldn't let them in my system. You can also say I'm going to forcibly log out an individual user. And a good way to do that is actually use a slight variant of the kill command, which is pkill. So you could have something like a sudo pkill. Pkill is another command that would allow you to send different signals. All right. And actually, let's take a quick look at this so we can see how this one works. I'll do man of pkill and take a quick look at this one. And so the general idea with your pkill command, as I mentioned, is you can send different types of kill signals. And based on what kind of kill signal you send, maybe you would stop a process, maybe you would just full out terminate the process, something like that. And there's, again, a whole bunch of different options of what are the things that you want to kill based on. You want to kill by IDs or usernames or things like that. So again, continue to reference your man pages anytime you're trying to use some of these commands or find websites and stuff like that that can help you out. So anyways, let's give it a try. Let's try killing one of my users using this. So I could have something like sudo pkill, and then the command that I want to send is -kill space -u, and then I would specify the user. So I'm sending the kill signal to a specific user account. And so maybe the user I want to kill is that suspicious Jenny user, Jenny, sure, and do something like that. And now if I check who are my users that are actively logged in, we'll see we just logged out Jenny regardless of where that connection was coming from. And so if I come over here, you get kind of a similar effect on the attacker side or on the remote connection side. It just says, hey, my connection was closed. All right. So it doesn't really matter if you killed by process ID or if you just flat out logged out a user. You know, the effect is kind of the same, especially if someone is SSH'd into your computer and doing things that way and has open active connections. And of course, I could try it again. I could kill Bob, right? Sudo, let's click in the tab here, sudo pkill -kill -u of Bob, something like that, and see, okay, now I've actually logged out the Bob user as well, and that connection has been terminated. So maybe you'd have somebody as an active defense where I've got one person working on the server who's trying to secure things a little bit, and I've got somebody else who's sitting there going www, and then they run the netstat command, netstat tunap, and try to see who's logged in, where are they coming from, what might be happening, and try to very, very actively pay attention to some of these things. You do want to be cautious about things like killing other users, like yourself, and that becomes a bit of a problem because what if you had a sandbox user, let's say, or perhaps even scarier, the root user, and that's the user account that you're logged in as. But then that's also the account that the remote user is logged in as, right? So if both of you are active on the server at the same time as the same user, this is where you'd want to be going and killing them by process ID. Because if you do try doing something like this, where you do something like sudo pkill -kill-u and then say sandbox, realize that, oh yeah, you can go and kill your own sessions as well. And I most certainly have seen lots of students do that, where they just, in their own paranoia, they're like, oh no, a sandbox user is logged into my system and now I need to remove them from my, oh, that was me. Or you'll get somebody who's, I've seen these happen in teams where, someone goes and does that, and then sitting right next to you, your teammate goes, holy crap, the red team just kicked me out. And it's like, oh, actually, I just did that. Whoops, sorry. So, watch out for friendly fire, right? When we're working with Linux, friendly fire is certainly on, and we definitely got to be careful about things like that. But nevertheless, it's kind of funny, and it's good things to practice in a competition. Okay, a couple other commands here that I like to kind of toss out. Very similar to commands to things you might be looking at for like your task manager style stuff in Windows. There is a command called top. And your top command will show you what are different things that are working from a processes perspective. And so it shows you your resources as well, right? We're looking at CPU utilization, memory utilization. What are some of the different things that are running? Some systems have a command called htop, which is a little bit fancier, a little bit colorful. I don't know if this one has it or not, htop. Let's see. No, command not found. But it is something that could be added. But nevertheless, top, htop, these are some similar commands that you can see to get like, okay, what is actually running on my system right now? And it kind of gives you this little live action view for that. All I'm really emphasizing here is just learn some more ways that you can get information about the processes that are running on your computer and which ones are using all your resources right now, stuff like that. Another useful one kind of along that vein when we're looking to monitor processes is something like the ps command. Right, PS will show you various processes that are happening, but the issue with the PS command is that it hides a lot of the output unless you specify the specific options. So again, if we take a look at the man pages for this, if I do man of PS, you'll see there are a whole bunch of different options that you could have to specify how do I want my process ID to show. It's like, just look at the examples section of this. It's like, oh boy, there are a whole bunch of different examples of how do I want to see my processes? Do I want to see it by user? Do I want to see it by ID? So I'm not pretending that there's just one good way to look at your processes. It really depends on what is the type of thing that you're looking for. Perhaps one of the classic ones, though, that we could take a look at is something like the -AUX. If you're not quite sure, perhaps try -PS space -AUX, and that would be a nice one to start with. So maybe I'll give that a try, PS-AUX. And that will give you a lot of process ID information related to different things that are running on your computer and where they might be. You might want to like make this go full screen and start to see some more of this column information. But anyways, it is something that's critical when you're really trying to dive into the details and go looking for specific things like which users are running which processes and where is it coming from, etc. And that's kind of a classic one to sort of learn about here. So monitoring your processes, monitoring your active connections, monitoring who's actually logged into your computer. Every single one of these is all a really nice idea. You're trying to be more proactive, that in the moment, let me kill something that's happening. The real important ones for process IDs that I find are random scripts that are running in the background. Right? When you've got some random Python script that's running and doing things, or some random bash script that perhaps the malicious users have tossed on your system and they're running it in the background, like that can be the type of thing where you really have to go hunting for who are the users. I've kicked them out. How are things still happening now? You might want to be doing things like checking your cron tab. You might want to be doing things like checking for random Python programs or bash scripts that are still running in the background and allowing the attackers to regain access to the system, because they didn't just have active one-time connection. They might have started something evil running in the background, and that's what you have to really go find and dig out and claw out and kill and remove the files and all that. Okay, one last command that I'd kind of like to show here, which is kind of nice, more on the legitimate side. So let's think about this not so much just as the competition where I'm trying to actively kick out the malicious force that's coming against me, but what if these were valid users? Right? What if Jenny and Bob are my employees and this is a valid operation and they're the ones who are logged into my system? Realize that I wouldn't necessarily just want to go over to my server and say, look, I'm just going to start killing active connections and, forget my employees. If they were doing important things, screw them, or, just kill it, whatever. It's like, no, you probably don't want to be doing that to your employees. And so realize there is a nice way that you can send messages to the people who are logged in remotely through commands like the wall command. Wall is a nice command to learn about. So I could do something like this, like wall, like server shutting down in 5 minutes, right? Please save your work. Please save your work. And especially if you're working on a system that has a whole bunch of active users, sending wall commands is kind of a nice way that we can see, like, they're going to get this message over here in the terminal. This is the message that they got, right? You get this broadcast message that just got sent out, shutting down and blah, blah, blah. And so it kind of forces them to acknowledge the message and say, oh, okay, yeah, James sent me an email a couple days ago. He sent me an email earlier today. I was warned about this a whole bunch of times. Things are going to get restarted. And now here's my 5-minute warning. And I better save what I'm doing before I actively go and get terminated because the server's shutting down for maintenance or upgrades or who knows what. So anyways, learning about the wall message, that is kind of a nice way that you can send messages back and forth to each other. Some computers also have a write command. I don't know if this is one that does. You could have something like write, and then you would have like a username like write Bob, and then you would have to specify what is the connection that Bob is actually logged in on. So let's take a quick look at that. You can see that on the W command, right? It shows the TTY. So Bob is currently logged in on PTS/2, whereas Jenny is logged in on PTS/1. So using something like the write command, you can now be more specific and say, I'm going to write a message to Bob on PTS/2. That's the terminal connection that they've got. Let's see. Ooh, I might need sudo for that. Let's try that with sudo. Sudo write. Let's see if I can have that. And now I can start writing messages like hello, and then that shows up over here. You start sending direct messages to specific users using the write command. Hey, I told you to save your work and log out, you know, something like this. And this is a way we can kind of very actively start blasting messages at users using something like the write command. And then when I'm all done, right, you can just interrupt it with Control-C and kind of go back out and just back to your terminal. But anyways, learning about both of these, learning about either the write command, the wall command, these are some ways you can start broadcasting messages to various users that are logged into your systems. And it is a nice way to if you can imagine, if Bob was working on some critical stuff, maybe he had some files open, you might want to not make him angry by just actively terminating your own users' connections. Maybe you just want to, you know, nicely tell them to log out, please. And then you could be sitting there on this side going, is he still logged out? Is it, nope, he's still there. He's still, Bob, please log out. I told you, like, come on, I'm going to press the button here. And then, you know, maybe you start getting a little passive aggressive about some of this stuff, but still it is a good thing to be able to do. So, okay. So good active connection stuff, whether it's for a competition or whether it's for an actual work environment, learning more about this stuff and seeing your active connections, all very good stuff to know.